On this Thursday night, a verdict in a deadly attack on a Muslim family in Ontario. Nathaniel Veltman guilty of murdering the Afzaals family who were out for a walk. What relieved relatives say still needs to be done to address hatred.
We pray that we can move forward to build a decent and just society.
An Israeli Canadian killed by Hamas is laid to rest.
Her views would not have changed. She would have been even more steadfast.
Why Vivian Silvers calls for peace endure as Israel's army continues to search Gaza's largest hospital. Plus, a proposed settlement in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit by Canadian veterans for disability benefits. And Panda diplomacy is back. Why China says it's sending new bears to the U.S.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There is a verdict in a case that gripped the entire country. More than 2 years ago, the Afzaals family, who were out for a walk in London, Ontario, were run over by a pickup truck. The man driving it told police he was out looking for Muslims to kill that day. Today, a jury found Nathaniel Veltman guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder.
He intended to instill fear and terror in our hearts. However, this wasn't just a crime against the Muslim community, but rather an attack against the safety and security of all Canadians.
Prosecutors called it an act of terrorism, the first time terrorism laws have been argued in front of a jury in a first-degree murder trial in this country. Our Jeff Semple was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. Jeff.
Donna, the judge had asked people inside the packed courtroom to restrain their emotions, but it proved to be too much. The victims' friends and family members gasped and burst into tears as the jury read out their verdict. Nathaniel Veltman guilty of first-degree murder. For the first time since the murder trial began almost 3 months ago, family members of the victims spoke publicly, describing feelings of grief and relief.
The enduring grief, trauma, and the irreplaceable void left by the loss of multiple generations has pierced us profoundly.
4 members of the Afzaals family were killed, their 9-year-old son seriously injured and orphaned, when Nathaniel Veltman plowed into them with his truck. The 22-year-old found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder.
While this verdict does not bring back our loved ones, it is a recognition by the justice system that the perpetrator of these heinous crimes is indeed a murderer and a terrorist.
Veltman was indeed charged with terrorism. It's the first time a jury in Canada has ruled on a terrorism case involving first-degree murder, and where the alleged terrorist is a far-right white nationalist.
That's really important because there are a variety of different type of extremist movements that are motivating people to commit acts of terrorism. And it's important that those individuals are understood to be terrorists.
Representatives from the local Muslim community who attended the trial say the attack left its members terrorized, questioning whether they needed to hide their Muslim faith.
We are living in a time in which there has been an increased number of incidences that are Islamophobic and hate-based. But today is an important step in terms of providing a deterrent for anyone who feels or thinks that this can happen without any consequence. Today is a clear, resounding message to say, absolutely not.
I want the world to know why I did what I did.
Just hours after his arrest, Veltman told police he intended to commit a terrorist attack, though he later tried to claim he was not in his right mind due to drug use and mental health issues. As the ruling was read out, Veltman slouched in his chair, expressionless, staring at the floor as he was led out of the courtroom.
Well, he's in shock.
His lawyer says they'll now consider an appeal.
There are live issues that perhaps should be resolved by an appellate tribunal. It's a first jury trial on terrorism, so that's going to make it interesting in and of itself.
Now, the jury didn't actually clarify whether Veltman is guilty of deliberately planning the attack or committing terrorism or both. Either one of those would have resulted in a first-degree murder conviction. That's something the judge is expected to address in the sentencing hearing next month. First-degree murder carries an automatic sentence of life in prison with no chance of parole for at least 25 years. Donna?
Jeff Semple in Windsor, Ontario tonight, thanks. In California, a Canadian man has been found guilty of attempted kidnapping and assault in the violent attack on the husband of former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. 43-year-old David DePape faces up to 50 years in prison. 83-year-old Paul Pelosi was bludgeoned with a hammer and suffered a fractured skull. DePape, originally from British Columbia, broke into the Pelosi's San Francisco home last October, claiming he wanted to kidnap Nancy Pelosi. She wasn't home. DePape said he hit Paul Pelosi in a moment of despair because his larger plan was thwarted. In Gaza, the UN says disease and hunger is spreading through the Gaza Strip. Staff at the Indonesian hospital in northern Gaza say they can no longer operate on seriously ill patients. The hospital's chief says more than 40 patients have been left in the reception area because there are no resources and practically no doctors. The Israeli army sent soldiers back to Shifa hospital today, where it claims Hamas has its command and control center, and late today released video it claims is a Hamas tunnel shaft under that hospital. Video Global News cannot verify. Mike Armstrong reports.
The sign on the door says baby girl. Israeli Defense Forces released this video Thursday of what appears to be a child's bedroom in northern Gaza. It also appears to have been used to hide weapons. The IDF claims it recovered rockets, rifles, ammunition, and explosives. The Israeli military also released an audio recording it says is between two Hamas fighters. One says he has rockets and asks how they should be delivered. He's told the person should move them in a baby stroller. But this may be what the IDF was most eager to find and show off. The Israeli soldier says it's the entrance to a tunnel outside a building in the Shifa hospital complex. IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari says military engineers are inspecting the tunnel, but that they also found others. In addition to Shifa, Hagari says tunnels have been discovered at the Rantisi Hospital and Al-Quds Hospital. They appear to be complex systems, he says, branching off in different directions. Now, Hagari says the IDF wants to show the proof as soon as possible, but that it's a slow and dangerous process. Soldiers have to worry about booby traps and are at times having to work while taking fire. Hamas Thursday again denied it has tunnels under hospitals, still insisting any evidence found is planted and that there is no Hamas control center under Al-Shifa.
We avoid all the hospitals all the time.
Now, there has been a very public battle for public opinion. Both sides have been putting out videos. This was a pickup found Thursday. The IDF says was supposed to be used in the October 7th attacks, but didn't go. It was still packed with weapons. But it's the tunnels that Israel has said were the reason it had to go into northern Gaza so hard. It says its special forces took out two Hamas leadership groups in tunnels this week. Those are images it wants to show. But the IDF says when it finds tunnels where Hamas fighters have left, it has to worry about explosives. And when it finds tunnels where Hamas fighters are still there, it has to use explosives, usually leaving them severely damaged. Donna?
All right, Mike Armstrong in Jerusalem, thanks. The Israeli military says it has found the body of one of the more than 200 hostages taken by Hamas in a building near Al-Shifa Hospital. Yehudit Weiss was 65 years old. She was being treated for cancer when she was taken captive from her home on the Be'eri kibbutz on October 7th. Israel did not specify how she died. Canadian-Israeli peace activist Vivian Silver lived in that same kibbutz. It was thought she was taken hostage too, but this week it was confirmed she was killed by Hamas in her home on October 7th. The 74-year-old was born in Winnipeg. She moved to Israel in 1974, and that's where her funeral was held today. Loved ones gathered to remember her passion for using friendship and cooperation to try to bridge the divide between Israelis and Palestinians. Here's Touria Izri.
Vivian Silver dedicated her life to peace, but did not live to see it happen. I still can't accept it, says her son Hen Zygan. The fact my mother will have grandchildren she will never meet. For more than a month, Silver's family believed she was taken hostage and still alive. Her heartbroken brother spoke at her funeral.
I will miss hearing her voice.
Neil Silver says his sister was always an idealist, even as a girl growing up in Winnipeg.
Just looking around today, you see the types of people that came religious, secular, Bedouin. She touched so many lives.
And I'm Vivian. She founded the group Women Wage Peace, promoting partnerships between Jews and Arabs. Silver would often drive sick Palestinians from Gaza to hospitals in Israel.
She was so involved in trying to help, and it's just so unfair.
Gadir Hani is a member of Women Wage Peace and an Arab Israeli. She was one of the last people Silver spoke to.
She believed in peace and working together.
Silver's brother says most of the people on Kibbutz Be'eri, where Silver lived, were left-leaning. But some of the survivors now question whether there will ever be an end to the violence.
Vivian wouldn't have been, her views would not have changed. She would have been even more steadfast, believing that there are people on the other side who really do want the same thing that the people on this side want.
Family and friends say Silver would tell those in doubt, there is no way to peace. Peace is the way. Touria Izri, Global News.
The RCMP has responded to a Global News investigation that found hundreds of people connected to the Iranian regime are in this country, threatening the lives of some Canadians. In a statement, the RCMP say it received reports of foreign interference being committed by or at the direction of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This week, Global News reported upwards of 700 people linked to the regime are living in Canada. The federal government has not given a clear answer as to whether it will designate Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist entity. The Prime Minister's agenda for the APEC summit coming up. Why support for Ukraine will be a top priority. The presidents of China and the United States spent hours together yesterday, meeting in San Francisco, their first face-to-face talks in more than a year. And when they emerged, there were signs of a softening in the testy relationship. They agreed to resume communications between their militaries. Xi Jinping said we need to build more bridges and pave more roads between each other. Later, Biden was asked if he still believes Xi is a dictator, something he called him back in June. Biden said yes. Well, that got a firm rebuke from China's foreign ministry, which called it extremely wrong and irresponsible political manipulation. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is also in California, and today he met with Pacific nation leaders at the APEC summit. The official agenda focused on building economic resilience in the region, but Canada has its own set of priorities, including drumming up more support for Ukraine. David Akin is traveling with the Prime Minister. David.
Well, Donna, one of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's priorities here is to remind Pacific leaders that Ukraine remains at war with a Pacific nation, an APEC member, and that, of course, is Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin is not among the leaders assembled here, but there is a Russian delegation at this meeting of Pacific leaders, and that delegation would certainly be aware that in a phone call Wednesday, Trudeau promised Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that he would advocate for the Ukrainian cause at this summit. Trudeau will argue that Pacific nations should support Ukraine in order to ease global food insecurity and help reduce food prices in Canada and around the world.
We're seeing international events like Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, which has included a devastating blockade of global grain sources that's denying food to the world, especially in places in the global south threatened with food insecurity. And my foreign minister.
APEC member Thailand is one of the world's largest importers of Ukrainian grain. One reason why Trudeau had this one-on-one meeting Thursday with Thailand's Prime Minister Trudeau.
I know it's been a very difficult time for you, so lots to talk about in our bilateral relationship, also lots to talk about in the world at this time. Good to see you as well.
Trudeau, in fact, had 15 or 20-minute one-on-one meetings with several leaders, but only briefly bumped into China's President Xi Jinping at the opening photo op. And it really is China that has been reluctant to commit APEC, or any other group China belongs to take strong action against Russia.
Russia is the rogue state at the moment, and China's walking a fine line in the middle. It has kept a strong relationship with Russia, but it hasn't fully aligned itself with Russia's objectives in Ukraine.
Last year's APEC summit finished with a declaration by leaders condemning Russian aggression, but leaders went on to say that APEC wasn't the place to do anything about that. We'll see if Trudeau can change that view this year. Donna.
All right, David Aiken in San Francisco, thanks. And a final note, after a 2-decade pause, it appears so-called Panda diplomacy between the U.S. and China is back on track. President Xi Jinping hinted China will send new pandas to the U.S., calling them envoys of friendship. China loans pandas to more than 20 countries, with the first ones arriving in America in 1972. Still ahead, Canadian veterans on the verge of a legal victory. The federal government has reached a proposed settlement agreement in another class action lawsuit filed by Canadian veterans. If approved in court, the settlement could see Veterans Affairs paying out money owed in disability benefits to more than 300,000 veterans or their survivors. Heidi Petracek explains what the case is all about.
Final settlement agreement.
An agreement between lawyers representing veterans receiving disability benefits and the government department responsible for them.
They're incredibly slow learners, and I think that's any government bureaucracy, it's so big, so cumbersome.
This is actually the second time veteran Dennis Manouche has taken Ottawa to court. The first was a battle over military pension clawbacks, settled for almost $880 million in 2013. Now, a decade later, this suit could see the government pay out up to $817 million to former members of the Canadian Armed Forces and RCMP.
The Veterans Ombudsman identified an error that took place from 2003 to 2010, and the Government of Canada at that time agreed to make a corrective payment.
That first error flagged 5 years ago. But then lawyers figured out Ottawa didn't include the interest in its corrective payment and discovered 2 other accounting errors on top of that. Lawyer Daniel Wallace says that means as many as 330,000 veterans could be owed more. The agreement still has to reach final approval by a court in Ottawa. A hearing for that is scheduled for December 18th, and it will take until sometime next year until claims by those affected will start to be processed. That includes claims from estates of veterans who have died in the years it has taken to settle the matter.
These are our honored heroes of our country and their families, and all they're asking for is dignity and respect, and you would encourage the government and their departments to do the same thing.
Legacy, the importance of standing up for what's right.
Manouche says his focus has been on healing from the injuries he suffered in his service now, and he hopes this case will be the last he'll have to take on. For its part, the Department of Veterans Affairs would only say that veterans, quote, deserve our greatest recognition and respect. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Austria Lake, Nova Scotia.
Next, the seismic science behind Iceland's looming volcanic eruption. In Iceland, people are waiting and watching the earth beneath their feet. There have been hundreds of small earthquakes, and authorities suspect a volcano could erupt at any moment. Eric Sorensen explains what is happening and where it might lead.
It was obvious as roads split apart this week that Grindavik had to be evacuated.
So we just came home to get some stuff.
They have about 5 minutes to get their belongings, and then we go to the next house.
It's now a ghost town.
3,800 people, and now there's no one living here, from 3,800 to 0.
They've discovered that Grindavik sits above a long subterranean intrusion of molten rock.
This intrusion now sits just below the Earth's surface, so a molten sheet of magma over a distance of 15 kilometers.
Fissures have opened up all over town, but where's the lava?
It is a land of ice above and fire below,
where residents have to be prepared. You can almost imagine the signs that might pop up only in Iceland with its unique geology. Iceland is a marvel, where the planet's tectonic surface meets the molten interior. Two great forces. First, the mid-Atlantic ridge, where the North American and Eurasian plates are pulling apart. Iceland straddles that ridge as it runs through the North Atlantic. The second force that has created this island of lava is a hotspot, one of the world's largest, a plume of magma from deep in the Earth's mantle, now pushing underneath the Reykjanes Peninsula. And these forces are not always on the same timetable. Since 2021, the nearby Fagradalsfjall volcano has regularly sent lava flowing. But right now, nothing visible.
Sometimes this molten rock comes up to the surface, but these are separate processes. This is a rifting event. This is a plate motion event. And plate motions occurs in the fits and starts, and they jerk apart sometimes.
There were more than 1,500 earthquakes just the last 2 days. Below, the magma is moving, but it's heavy and could remain up to 1 kilometer deep all the way to the ocean.
I hope it starts out in the ocean. It would be great to get a new island, and the entrance to the harbor will be better.
Earthquakes and volcanoes, together or separately, Icelanders never know exactly when. They just have to be ready. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Thanks for watching. Jeff Semple will be here at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I will see you again next week. Our final note is a tribute to Carl Tremblay, lead singer of the Quebec band Les Cowboys Fringants, who has died at the age of 47. Folk rock band has been a staple of the Quebecois music scene for about 30 years. Tremblay was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2022, and he played his last show to a sellout crowd this summer.
T'es jamais fiable, tu flopes tes payes. Le vendredi, tu rentres pas quand t'es l'homme.